What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the arena with me, your host, Matt. I've got a special guest with me today, Nicki Joiner. She is an award-winning entrepreneur, dynamic career readiness speaker, dedicated to helping students navigate their future careers with both confidence and clarity. She has a background in recruiting and a master's degree in student affairs and brings a unique blend of both industry insight and higher education expertise to every talk that she delivers. And she delivers a lot of them, my friends. First of all, Nikki, thank you for being here. Second of all, who is Nicki Joiner?
Oh, I'm honored. Why am I so honored? Can you come everywhere with me? I can give you a microphone. We can grab a speaker. Let's go. Oh my gosh, that's so awesome. Thank you so much for having me today. I'm coming at you live from my home office in Dallas, Texas, which is still so wild to think about because I feel like I've lived in a lot of states. So while I call Dallas home for now, I've traveled all over. I've lived in 9 states since I graduated from high school in 2008. So if you're a math person, you got to do that math. If not, we can just move on. But yeah, I am what I would call like probably quarter midlife. We're a little bit in between there. I'm 35 and on my 3rd career, which is exactly what you said. I'm a career readiness speaker. Isn't it wild? The person on their 3rd career is a career readiness speaker. But yeah, I spent about 10 years working in higher education on various college campuses like Purdue University, Emory, Millikan University, and then I spent some time working for some national fraternities in the higher education space, so Triangle Fraternity and Delta Chi. And then this thing called the pandemic happened, and I decided that maybe a higher education career was not for me, so I applied for jobs. A lot of jobs, actually. And I got my job as a sourcer at JP Morgan Chase. Now, a sorcerer is not to be confused with magician, okay? I was not doing any magic, though I was making dreams come true. But I was the person behind the computer messaging students in college about internships and full-time jobs. So if you're listening to this and you've ever got a message from a recruiter, you're wondering if it's a real person on the other end, sure is. And at JP Morgan Chase, it was me. So yeah, then I had some other experiences there, worked as a program manager, as a good old-fashioned recruiter, and then I too decided that maybe it was time to take my show on the road. So I became a speaker full-time, and now full-time I talk to students about college and career readiness, how to get them future ready, whatever that means for them. So wow, what a journey that
Nikki,
is. What a
Nikki,
journey.
I gotta ask, like, have you always carried this energy with you your entire life? Was this something that you kind of had to unlock? Like, I know for myself, I used to be very reserved, insecure, hesitant. And, my journey was one of like, I came out to the world and was for the most part accepted and just had like this total unlock of like freedom and energy and clarity. And now people call me energetic, and I never would have thought in a million years. So I'm just curious for you, like, what is the story behind Nikki's energy?
Oh, that's such a great question. So I have always been like a boisterous, high energy, fun person. But I think in a lot of ways, there's probably been some really specific things that have helped me unlock it more. And I think that the older we get, the more life experiences we get. But in some cases, the more comfortable we get with ourselves. So as a younger person, I was always very energetic and very outgoing. But in many cases, people categorize that as weird. And like I was the quote unquote like the weirdo loud girl. I was the bracelet girl who had all the bracelets and was really loud. But the older that I get, I realize that like that is a part of who I am and how I show up in the world. So it's just kind of like a little bit of a finesse to figure out like, is it loud or is it energy? Can we be loud without saying things? So I think with more lived experience comes more maturity to kind of hone in on that and be more comfortable with it. So what I always like to tell people is I don't think I'm as much like outgoing as I am comfortable. And in this stage in my life right now, I am super comfortable with myself. So I am super comfortable with the people around me. When I was younger, it was the more comfortable I am, the more I become myself. But now I'm just super comfortable with myself. I know what I offer the world. I know what I offer the people around me, and I know what I offer myself. So in turn, that's how I like to show up.
What prompted you to initially start your initial career, your first of three careers? Like what do we need to know, or what would be helpful for myself and the audience to know about your upbringing to better understand like the person that you are today?
Yes. Oh my gosh, I love that question. So I'm a first generation college student, and when I was experiencing college, I had some really great experiences in my sorority. I had some really great experiences working in the Multicultural Student Services office and working in the Student Life office. And all three of those experiences led me to get a really in-depth look as a student about how a college campus runs. And specifically, when I was a junior in college, I worked with some of my friends to put together a proposal to get a Greek life advisor because we didn't have one at our school. We had one graduate assistant who worked part time and had a whole family. Okay. So, like, really, part time is, we know, full time. And we needed a full time staff. So as a junior in college, like, I literally celebrated my 21st birthday, and then the next week went to the student government to be like, hello everyone and welcome. I am here to perform this proposal because we needed a staff person. And in that moment, I realized that I wanted to work in higher education. And spoiler, it was not because I wanted to go and like change lives of students. It was not because I had an awesome experience as a student, and I wanted to give that to more people. Though all of those things are true, my main reason and main initiator for going into higher education was I saw so much systemic inequity in the student experience that I wanted to be a part of changing it. And I went into higher education and was looking for roles specifically where I could help restructure the ways that students experience things. Not their actual experience, because that's different for each person, but like, how do we talk about like systems and operations and structures that support the student experience? Because I saw firsthand how my awesome and amazing Greek advisor, Becky, if you're listening, I love you so much. She was underpaid, but overworked, and we could never really reach our fullest potential because we didn't have the resources to be able to do that. So when I went into higher ed, I was not a studenty person. I was not really excited to advise students. I was not super jazzed to do one-on-ones. That is not my ministry. Still not my ministry. But I went into higher education largely to help to course correct a lot of the structures and systems and operations that students have negative experiences from. So yeah, I think my story's a little bit different in a lot of ways about why I went into higher ed, but ultimately I think that's probably why I didn't stay a long time.
What did you learn, not necessarily about the role during that period, but what did you learn about yourself over that decade?
Oh, that's such a good question. I think I learned a lot of things about myself when I worked in higher ed. The first thing that I think is probably the most important lesson is you can't be everything to everyone. And in a lot of the roles that I had, I was really fixated on being everything to everyone. My first job, I was an assistant director in a student life office. So student life encompassed so many different things that I was kind of indoctrinated into this world of higher education by way of help the students however they need help. And I'm like, okay, I love that. But it really kind of jump-started me on this path to being everything to everyone. And probably the second thing that I learned, to kind of piggyback off of that just a little bit, is more often than not, I think when we are in an advisor role or a manager role, we're used to answering questions. And I work with students a lot, so you can imagine I probably get 100 questions a day. And I think the one thing that I really reflect on in my career that I've learned is that it's okay to ask more questions than you answer, especially as someone in a leadership role, in a manager role, in a decision maker role that has influence over the way that people experience work or their life in general. It's okay to ask more questions than you answer. It's okay to ask just as many questions as you answer. And in many ways, I think my first job experience and my graduate program prepared me for the philosophy of answer the questions, develop yourself, develop students. And I kind of wish that someone would have reversed that for me because I learned it a little bit later in my higher education career. And then I would probably say the third big lesson that I learned working in higher ed, specifically about myself, was that there is lots of ways to take up space in a room. And as a leader in college, I was largely taught lead externally, lead from the front. So when I went into the world, that's what I did because that's what people taught me to do. And working in higher education taught me that there's lots of ways to lead and actually helped me formulate the leadership style that I have now, which is often really rooted in questions and leading from the back as opposed to the front. So while I am on the stage, used to being the person who is, having the microphone, for lack of a better term, thinking about how I show up in spaces and how much space I take up is largely based on my experience working in higher ed. And it has been tremendous from the lens of self-awareness. Because as a comfortable, confident, and fun person,
charismatic.
Yeah, sometimes I can be a lot. So I learned kind of how do I find my place in a certain situation or setting, and how does that differ in different settings, and then how can I lead from the front, how can I lead from the back to make things happen. And that has been something that I've taken with me in every career.
This might sound like a weird question, but have you always been happy? And what I mean by that is it feels like there's a lot of people that I speak with on this podcast, myself included, that suffer maybe for a period of time and almost are forced to change, have some sort of rock bottom moment that kind of, for better lack of a word, puts people back against the wall. Mm-hmm. It's like, I got to do something and I have to make some sort of change. And so I'm just curious, have you always had this foundation of self-awareness, of authenticity? Was there ever a challenging period of your life that kind of forced you to I don't want to say wake up, but I think you see where I'm going with the question. Yep. What comes to mind when I say that?
Yes. So to directly answer your question, I don't think I've ever had a rock bottom moment. No. But I am also a firm believer that we don't need to go through hard things to learn a lesson. And I think more often than not, the reason that people do learn a lesson in a rock bottom moment, I'll call it, is because they don't reflect in any other scenario. So that's how, in some cases, we get there. So when I think about the term happiness, right? I think about the difference between, is happiness a feeling or is happiness a state of mind? And for many people, happiness is a feeling, right? It's something that I feel, it's something that sparks, and then maybe something that leaves. My philosophy on happiness is that I need to choose it. So it's a state of mind for me. So my state of mind can be happiness, and I can feel stressed. My state of mind can be happy, and I can feel anxiety. So this yes and mentality, I think often, especially when I work with young people, their happiness is tied to a feeling. So when they feel it, and when they don't, they don't. For me, I like to focus on happiness as something that I choose as a state of mind, because all people that choose happiness as a state of mind are not only feeling happy, right? And I cannot tell you the amount of times that students will be like, did you have a monster this morning? Man, how many coffees did you drink? And I'm like, yeah, you know why? And they're like, why? I'm like, because I choose my mood. I, most days, do not wake up being like, let's go. No, I'm a regular human being. I'm like, I'm sick of this. I'm tired. I'm sad. I don't want to get out of the bed today. I feel XYZ. But I think it is a yes and I do think two truths can exist at the same time. So for me, I like to think of happiness as a state of mind, something that I choose, and I can be in a happy state of mind and also feel happy.
Was there ever a moment in your life where you held that mentality, but were really pushed? Like you're like, I'm really on the verge of I don't believe this anymore. What is happening? Was there ever a moment where your belief system was put to the test, if you will?
Oh, always. And I think transparent moment. As someone who travels and gets on a plane, 50, 60 times a year, who stays in a hotel room, sometimes more than my own house or my own room, it is often viewed as a super glamorous job. People are like, oh, wow, you must have the best job ever. And my job is cool. And it's incredibly stressful and mentally draining. And there has been several times where I've woken up the day that I have a gig and I'm like, wow, I feel so much anxiety. Or wow, like I feel so much like self-deprecation or self-hate. Like, gosh, I start questioning everything and I'm like, oh my gosh. But then I go up in front of, sometimes it's 5, sometimes it's 500 people. And I have to remind myself that by choosing happiness as a state of mind, I can show up for people in the best way that I know how in that moment. So to directly answer your question, yeah. And I don't think it's like, has there ever been a moment? Like, has there been a moment in the past week? Yeah. Like, has there been a moment in the month of June 2025? Yeah, probably more than average, actually. So yeah, I think I experience it often. But for me, it's just about like, how do I find the equilibrium in a way that feels good and most importantly, genuine? Because sometimes when people are overly happy, they're like, are you really happy? Sometimes I have to manage my happiness with the other feelings that I'm feeling.
I think that's a big thing right there. How do you do that? Because I think that's something that I can tend to fall into the trap of truly, I do wake up a lot of days like, I'm waking up to the birds chirping now. I moved back home and it's like, this is such a blessing. Like, wow, I feel like I'm like so immersed in nature. Like I'm waking up to the birds chirp. How cool is that? So I wait, and I'm generally a positive, happy person. But I think there's times where I don't necessarily let myself feel like sad or doubt, even though in deep down, like it's there. And I think there's a reason it's there and it wants to be heard in some form. And there can be a tendency for me to be like, oh yeah, but think about where you were last year. Like think about how great, like your life is. And I think that's important to keep a perspective. But at the same time, I think it's also important to honor those feelings. So how do you kind of manage that balance?
Yeah, so there's this excellent saying that my therapist has, and it is, all feelings are valid, all behavior is not. I'm going to say that one more time. All feelings are valid, all behavior is not. So I'll use an example from, when I'm on the road. Sometimes when people walk into an assembler, they walk into a session, they're just trying to peep the vibe. They're like, is it cool to be in here right now? If they're in high school, they're like, well, I'm forced to be here. Like, what's this lady going to talk about? So I'm normally like, hey, y'all, what's up? What's up? What's up? Because that is my state of mind. So sometimes I will experience students who are like, yeah, I just don't want to be here. Overly toxic positivity is like, oh my gosh, it's going to be fun. Like, we're going to have so much fun today. That's annoying, right? But if someone's like, yeah, I just don't want to be here. Me responding and being like, I've felt that way before.
That's what I say.
And then, right.
I'm like, I totally get it.
I totally get it. Right. Then I'm in a space where I'm like, oh, wow. Like, that is also a feeling that I have felt. That is also a feeling maybe I felt before I got out of the car. Right. So having the duality to be able to recognize, again, two truths exist at the same time. Two feelings can exist at the same time, but also listening to what people are saying and responding to what they're saying, not waiting for my own response, right? Listening to understand instead of listening to respond helps me kind of navigate that, I think, in a different way. And sometimes I just have things to say and I'm really excited about it. And that's probably why I'm a speaker, right? But there is lots of ways to help people feel like they matter. And more often than not, it is not being overly positive with someone. It is listening. So I have to practice that myself, though, with my own self. Because sometimes I'm like, oh, Nikki, so many people are counting on you. Oh, Nikki, you do this thing. Oh, Nikki, you can't, this, you can't that, and you can't that. And I'm like, Nikki, you need to listen to yourself the way that you listen to other people. You need to give yourself the same grace that you give other people. You need to ask the same questions or similar questions that you're asking yourself. You need to, or the questions that you're asking other people, you need to ask yourself those questions too. So sometimes I have to remind myself that, like, I'm not a super person. I'm not a superhero.
You're pretty darn close, Nikki. You're pretty darn close.
See? And it's stuff like that I'm like, well, on Matt's podcast, he said that I was pretty dang close to a superhero. So, Nikki, you can't veer too much from this. You know, like, it's just some of the stuff I'm like, man, Nikki, like, you are a person, right? And people have feelings, and it's okay to experience more than one feeling at once.
No, there was something I heard profound, or it really touched me the other day on a podcast. It was with Scooter Braun, who I don't really know much about, but I know he's been in the public eye, and I know kind of what he generally does. But anyway, he was on the podcast for the first time in a while, and he said something of like, I had to realize that everything that I had done, I had gotten so much praise in my life. And then he went through a period where he got a bunch of like hate from the public, like from millions and millions of people in the public eye. And he's like, it helped me realize that I didn't deserve that hate, but I also didn't deserve all the credit and praise I got. And like that to me was really profound, because for me, it's like whenever I get praise, I'm like, yeah, you're right. Yeah, you're right. But then when I get hate, it's like, well, you don't know me. And so just like holding that, like, just being mindful and present and holding, like, not attaching to those either or, I think is like really, really valuable. So you then get into, go ahead, you're going to say something, to say it.
Yeah, and it's so interesting that you say that, because I think when we're young, like very young, we're taught that if we do something bad, we're bad. And if we do something good, we're good. But the older that we get, I think the more complex that becomes, right? Because I view myself as a good person, but I have certainly done bad things. So then it becomes like, how do we wrestle with the complexity of people, and how does that help us think about who we are as people, but also the ways in which we treat the people around us? And specifically from a mental health perspective, like sometimes it can be really easy to anchor in one experience that we've had with someone, or the one thing that we know about them. And then as a result, that is the shaped perception of that person. And I think for me, a lot of people, their shaped perception of me is, you pretty dang close to Superwoman. And in many cases, I'm like, man, the people, like, I wish that more people were closer to the actual complexity of everything around me. And I was talking with my husband about this the other day, and he said something that I was like, he goes, well, how often do you show people that side of you? Almost never. And I was like, no, you're right. So I think in a lot of cases there's fear associated with that. I think that's why people don't do it. Well, I wouldn't say people. That's why I don't do it.
Totally. Yeah, this is what he said was, I realized that when I was getting all that hate, that like none of them knew who I really was. But then it made him reflect that, like, when he was getting all that praise, none of them really knew who he was. And that to me was like, wow, that is such a great perspective. Yep. So you then go from the higher education space into the corporate world as a recruiter. What did you learn about Nikki during that period of life? Obviously, that's also a big transition career-wise. So what did you learn both personally as well as professionally during that time period?
Oh my gosh, I learned so much about myself when I stepped into the corporate space. I think from a personal standpoint, I learned a lot about boundaries. And people don't really talk about boundaries a lot in the higher education landscape. I think from a student perspective, all the way up until the people that work there, mostly because they are non-existent. Okay, at least for me, they were non-existent. So I must be everything to everyone, and do all the things. And I learned in corporate around boundary setting, specifically when being in a new environment, what actually is a boundary. And I don't think until I started my first corporate job, at age 31, that I firmly understood what a professional boundary was, because I had not experienced that prior. So from the professional landscape of what did I learn professionally, absolutely 100% around the professional boundaries. Corporate sits a little bit differently in terms of like when people work, and how results driven they are versus how people driven they are. So from the professional landscape, I definitely learned the boundary to like manage expectation around there. But from the personal sense, It was revolutionizing. Is that a word? If it's not, it is.
I was about to say, you just blew my mind.
It is. Because I don't think that I knew what a boundary was until I was expected to operate within other people's boundaries. Because again, in the higher education landscape, we didn't have the boundaries. It was you work all the time, you do what you're asked, you're a generalist, jack of all trades. In corporate, I was the queen of sourcing, not to be confused with a magician. Okay, so like that was my one job. So saying no to other projects, saying no to other, tasks, responsibilities, and also working from the boundary perspective of now I'm not on a team of 5, I'm on a team of 500. So as a people person, that was a little bit challenging for me, I'll be honest, because I'm like, I can't have this relationship with 500 people. And then seeing the different landscape in which work operated, it was just like, for me. There were some things that I liked and some things that I was like, no ma'am, I will not be touching this with a 10-foot pole anymore. But I think often most adults only ever sit in one specific industry or work type or career, maybe not job anymore, but largely they sit in one industry type or one work environment type. And for me, going from the polar opposites helped me see the full gamut of things, which also helped me to think differently about how I view things in general, right? Sometimes I think we can have a very narrow focus on the way that we view everything, but because we have these on, we don't notice it. Because I flipped so drastically, I began to notice how narrow-minded some of my leadership styles were. I began to notice how narrow-mindedly some of my language use was. Some of my thought processes. I'm like a this versus this person. Oh, it's so bad. It's like a really bad vice that I have, but I just am. And corporate helped me realize that not everything is black and white. And honestly, most corporations and people that work in the corporate sector, in my experience, operate in a state of gray. Lots of things that we do are in the state of gray. And I don't think I realized that. So it helped me kind of debunk some of those just a little bit.
And so during that period, I guess my question is, were you fulfilled? And I asked that because ultimately you went back into, I guess, being a recruiter, everyone can make meaning depending on, who you are and the perspective you have. Like there's a way in which me as a corporate banker, I could have tied some sort of meaning into what I did. Totally. I didn't at the time. So, but you ultimately went back to working with students in some form, in a different way. And so I guess my kind of question is, what do you feel ultimately pulled you back into that arena in a different form, of course? But it's just kind of interesting because you started in higher education, went to corporate, and then ultimately went back in a different form.
Oh, yes. Okay. So I'm about to share some tea. Okay, I'm about to share some personal things about my journey because I think this is full circle. And I have quite a few people that ask me, like, why did you leave a cushy 6-figure salary in the corporate area where you were working with students, right? Because for a lot of people, they're like, oh, she worked with students in college, she worked with students in corporate, now she works with students as a speaker. And for me, I think it was a very transitional experience that I had. A couple years ago, I had a surgery that I thought was going to be routine in and out in one day, and it ended up not being. And I had 4-system organ failure and was in the hospital, specifically the ICU, for a total of 94 days.
Wow.
And yeah, and a lot of people don't know this about me because I'm not like, oh, here's all my things about my hospital stay. But it drastically changed my life. And I worked at Chase before I had the surgery and after. And when I was in the hospital, I distinctively remember everything around me moving so fast, but my life moving so slow. And for people who have been lied up in a hospital bed for more than a couple hours, it ain't sexy. Okay? Like, it's not fun. It's not exciting. Reruns of Shark Tank. You start counting the ceiling tiles. Like, it's not a place. And I was there for a long time. And I essentially had to rehabilitate myself because I had 4 system organ failure. So I was on all but a breathing machine. I was on all but dialysis. I mean, I had a PICC line in my arm where they were feeding me nutrients, and I hadn't eaten real food in over 90 days. So this experience really helped to slow down the world for me, my own world. Because, like most people, I think we're taught, like, achieve, get your big dream, make it happen, have the family, do the thing, go, 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 until you retire, and then you can slow down. And in many cases, that was what I had been fed too. And again, that seemed to be the dream, right? Because that was the only thing that I knew. But if there's one thing that I realized when I was laid up in that hospital bed, it's that there is multiple forms of currency: time, money, and relationships. And while I was not getting paid the currency of cha-ching while I was up in the hospital bed, I did have other forms of currency. And it started to help me think about, how do I actually want to live my life? What do I want my day in and day out to be when I get out of this bed? Because in most hospital rooms, especially ones that are overnight stays, they're big picture windows. You can see outside, but you can't go outside. And when I was there, I just started to realize that I don't think a 9 to 5 where I don't have control over my time and my outcome is my end game. So I started to think about, what do my last years look like? Is it 40 years? Is it 80 years? Is it 10 years? I don't know. I don't think any of us know. And I don't mean to be morbid about it, but it is what it is. So that experience helped me think differently about what is the type of life that I actually want to live. So I loved my job at Chase. I had, we all have great people that we work with and not so great people that we work with, but I had a lot of great people that I worked with. I was paid well. We had excellent benefits. The work that I did day in and day out, I was good at. I loved making job offers to students. It was awesome. But the lifestyle that came with the job, clocking in, clocking out, reporting to someone, and not having full autonomy over my decisions and how I lived my full day, was ultimately what led me to leave. And again, it wasn't like I hate corporate. There were some things I did hate about corporate, but there were also a lot of things that I loved about it too. And it has actually positioned me to be very both effective and successful, I think, as a speaker, because as a career readiness speaker now, I talk to students about what hiring managers and employers look for. As someone who used to do that, as someone who used to hire students. But I think ultimately the reason why I love the job that I have so much is first and foremost the impact, but a close second is the lifestyle that I get to live. And I like to have control over my time and my outcomes, and to be able to prioritize the things that matter to me. So.
Yeah, no, that is such a great story. And it reminds me of a couple of things. One being, I was just doing an event yesterday and for corporate peeps. Mm-hmm. And there's just, at least when you're in it, I think it's this, the grass is always greener. Mm-hmm. Is this general perspective about entrepreneurship, like, oh my gosh, it's glamorized. And I was trying to make a point to, in a respectful, hopefully compassionate way of like, there's always trade-offs. Mm-hmm. Yes, I have complete control of my time, but I really value that. So that is important to me. But there's also a lot of challenges. You got benefits right now. You've got a salary coming in every 2 weeks. You know when you're getting paid. When you take time off, you get paid for it. When I take time off, not only do I not get paid for it, I'm not even bringing in new business because I'm not, hopefully not working. And so there's a lot of things that I think people tend to glamorize about the profession that I think aren't often shown just in social media. And that's probably why you hear a lot like, oh my gosh, you have the most amazing job ever. You get to travel and all the yada, yada, yada. But there's just so much that goes on behind the scenes that, and I'm not complaining by any means. Like, I love what I do. I think it's, to me right now, definitely the greatest job I've had, but there's a lot that comes with it. And, I guess my question for you is, and it's interesting because that moment you just shared isn't a rock bottom moment, but it's the moment that I envisioned when I asked that question originally, was
Oh,
like
okay. Okay.
this moment of like clarity or shift in perspective of what's important in life. Normally, I feel like oftentimes can come from people during their quote unquote rock bottom or period of life.
Yeah.
But for you, it just came at a health scare, which often I think it often does as well for people because you realize, I think, what's really important. So I guess what was like the most profound insight that you had during that period of time? And also, hopefully, that goes to show people that like the importance of actually doing nothing, just like proactively, of like being more present, of allowing
Yeah.
yourself to be bored, because so many people are like, man, I don't know what my hobby is. I don't know what I'm passionate about. And it's like, because you don't give yourself the space to explore that. Every time you get a sense of boredom, you pick up the phone.
Absolutely.
And I'm guilty of that too. And I'm really trying to be more intentional about like giving myself the space to think about what I might value going forward, what's important to me.
Right. Right. I mean, and I think too, in a lot of ways, I was taught like you work 8 hours a day and then you come home and then you can do your life after work. And when I was in the hospital, I started to realize how much people's lives around me, specifically the people that I care about, how much it flipped upside down when they had to pause their 8 to 5 to come and be with me. My husband, my sister, my grandma, she's retired, but she still got an 8 to 5 with her social life, okay? My mom, my dad, like all of these things. And it just started to really get me thinking about like, what is an hour? Like, what is an hour, and at what point in the day does that hour matter? Because for me, I could only have visitors at certain times, especially when I was in the ICU. I could only have visitors at certain times. So people having to flip their entire schedules around so they can come and be here for the hour visit that I have because I only had an hour, started to get me to think about like, man, I've really been pushed my whole life to think that like 8 hours is a shift, or in some industries 10 hours is a shift, and like then you can go home. Well, is home a place, or is it again a state of mind? Like I would rather be home all the time. So I think being in the hospital helped me reflect around like, how do I want to spend my time, and what realistically can I align to that to help to fulfill the lifestyle that I want. Again, like there is a lot of people who want to do speaking full time. I cannot tell you, when I tell people I'm a youth motivational speaker, the first thing that they say is, oh man, I've always wanted to. And then here we go, And to your point, it's certainly not without trade off. Like there are things that I miss. There is stuff I'm not able to do. And while I can go grocery shopping, in the middle of the day on a Wednesday, or I can go to the thrift store after this call that we have today. I also sleep in a hotel bed 50 nights out of the year. I also go grocery shopping when I get home because I'm sick of the takeout containers for when I'm not. Like, I also pay for my own insurance. I also get told no 100 times for every one yes that I get. So, we always want what we think we don't have. And I remember specifically growing up, like I was like, oh, I would love for my hair to be curly. I would love for my hair to be curly. I love the curly haired girls. And then I went to college and my roommate had curly, beautiful hair. And I was like, oh my God, tell me everything. And she's like, girl, it sucks. Like, I hate my hair. It's awful. I can never do this. XYZ, whatever. We always want what we can't have. And it's not that, I shouldn't say we can't have, that we don't have. And for me, it's not about, the grass is not always greener on the other side. The grass is greener where you water it. But make sure you water it in the house that you want to be in, right? And for me, I knew that the 9 to 5 in the corporate setting was just not my thing. But what were some of the things that I loved doing? I loved teaching people how to do things in short amount of time with a microphone in my hand. So that sounds a lot like what I do now.
So how do you impart to the students that you speak to on career readiness who maybe have fallen victim to that same mindset that you and I did, or have been indoctrinated to that same mindset of, oh, just get the 9 to 5, get the high paying corporate finance job, where they get so locked in because that's what I'm supposed to do. Like, how do you work with students to, I guess, like, what's your approach to that more broadly? Because, like, I think about it, like, the amount of students that might feel that way but not even realize it. Like, are you
Totally.
encouraging them to do that? Or are you encouraging them to explore, to be more curious, to explore alternative paths? Like, I guess I would just love to hear your approach on that.
Yeah, so, and I think there's a couple different reasons that I do what I do, the way that I do it. But I think the first and foremost thing that's so important when you're talking to young people is recognizing that there's a difference between teaching them a framework and a skill and telling them what you did. And I think it's really important, and I say this in every session that I do. Not everyone's path is going to be my path. Not everyone can do what I do, just like not everyone can do what you do. Just like not everyone can do or have a skill set that maybe their mom has or their grandma has or whomever. So I think the first and foremost thing that I really try to impart with students when I'm talking with them is the mix between this is my story and here's what was possible for me, and then start to get practical with them around how they can make something possible for them that works for them. Because in many cases, especially in today's age, I think people see, oh, Nikki left her corporate job to be a speaker. That means I can do it too. And I'm not saying that you can't, but I think you need to understand the full picture of what that is and what it entails before you decide if you're going to do that or not. I work with a lot of students that are college going, that are like, hey, I'm going to college or already in college. I also work with a decent amount of students that are like, I'm workforce ready or I'm trade school ready. And in some cases, I work with people that are like, I'm neither one of those things and I don't know what's next. So my first thing is the framework. And the framework that I largely anchor in is you have to have a skill set for something, you have to have a mindset for something, and there has to be a market for it, which I think is the third thing that's really important that oftentimes a lot of people, and that I believe a lot of people who talk about what I talk about are like, follow your dreams, turn your passion into your paycheck. That is not realistic advice for young people. And I don't mean to be crass, but it's not. So we need to help people, and largely that is what I do. I help people figure out what is their true skill set and what is their mindset around work. And in some cases, their mindset is, I'll grind for 12 hours a day because I want to be able to support my family. Or I want to work half days, or I don't want to work with people, or I do want to work with people. That mindset component is really, really important. And then the third thing is the market. Is there a market, i.e., is someone going to pay me for what I want to do? Am I going to be able to get paid for this, right? In a perfect world, I would love to be a dance teacher. If I didn't have this job, I'd be a dance teacher for life. You know what I learned? That my lifestyle does not support the salary that comes with being a dance teacher. There's not a market for me. And I think that third area is particularly important when you talk to young people. So helping them figure out what is their dream, how do they follow their dream in a way that is realistic. Because until you reach your pinnacle career or your dream job, you still got bills, baby. You still got something that you need to do. So we need to figure out how do we get you in spaces where you are not having a job or a career that you're running away from. And that really is the message, right?
That's great.
Skill set, mindset, and the third one is market. Is there going to be someone that pays you for that thing? So in the meantime, if you really want music or you're really into, producing music, as an example, I was just talking with this young person the other day working with his resume, and he said, this is my ride or die career. And I'm like, great, how long do you think it's going to take you to get there? And he said, maybe 5 to 7 years. Awesome. What are we doing in the meantime? Let me help you for the meantime, right? Let me help you figure out how do we optimize your application materials so that you can have a job that you're not running away from to go to the studio to go home and make beats. And in turn, that helps you become a more well-rounded, holistic person so you can take those things that you learn, right? You don't have to settle for a job until you find your dream one. You can do what you want in the meantime to get the job that you deserve until you find the one that is the pinnacle or the right one. But I think a lot of times, and largely why I went into this, is because the message for a lot of young people is follow your dream. And I love that. I wish somebody would have told me to follow my dream. I don't even know what my dream was when I was 18. But follow your dream, and let's help you get prepared for all the things that are going to come in between what happens from now until you get your dream. Because if you don't have that, you're likely never going to make it to the dream portion of the world that you want. So yeah, just very practical. But again, that framework is really what I anchor in, and trying really hard not to impart my experience as the framework to the students. But instead, here's something that you can actually take and use in your own life, because not everyone is going to jump 3 careers. And just because I jumped 3 careers doesn't mean that you should. Not everyone is going to move to 9 different states. Just because I moved to 9 different states doesn't mean that you should. So being really mindful about the experiences that I share with people, how I frame the message, so that in turn they can make sure that they're taking something from it and applying it to their own lives, seeing themselves in the message as opposed to seeing the message as themselves.
Yeah, that's very well said. It reminds me of, I'm going to be speaking to commercial bank interns at a bank. And it's where I used to be. And I have to make very clear in my story, extra clear, that this was not for me.
Yep.
But it doesn't mean it's not necessarily for you. It just wasn't for me, who I authentically am as a human being. Right. Because they see, they may see me as like, oh my gosh, he was in this great job, or what I thought, this is what I'm going for, and then he left. Like, why did he leave? What is he not telling me? And so I really love how you separate your story from your framework. To wrap this up, what in life are you most proud of?
Oh, what in life am I most proud of? That is such a good question. What a stumper. I am most proud. Well, I think if I had to pick one thing, I am most proud of aligning values. My ability to align values. Now, let me be clear. It's not 100% of the time. But I've had to make some really tough decisions in friendships, in business, with clients, with family, all of the above. And I am most proud of my ability to do that in a way that centers my values, even when the decisions are hard and unpopular. So I think that's something I'm most proud of. It's so funny that you asked this, because immediately I started, the second that you answered that, or that you asked that question, I started thinking about all the people in my life that I'm so proud of.
Wow.
And I was like, oh wow, like I am so proud of my sister, because she moved away and like did this thing, and I love that. I'm so proud of my husband. He just finished his comps, and that's why I had to pause for a minute, because I was like, dang, you asked what in the world am I so proud of? And I started thinking about all the people in my life and how I'm so proud of them. So in many ways, I think my most proudest accomplishment or moment might be surrounding myself with people that I care about and that care about me.
That's
so I think that
look
could
at that.
be a good second.
Look how you just got there. Maybe that's your invitation to tell them.
Yes, I think it should be. I think it should.
Nicki Joiner, everybody. Nikki, thank you so much for your time.
Thank you.